As you know, Easter week, at least for me, begins on Palm Sunday with the journey into Jerusalem. And we're all in that journey towards our resurrection, really, and that process of all that Easter symbolically means. And last Sunday, being Palm Sunday, Reverend Michael Gott spoke and gave a wonderful lesson. If you weren't here, I wish you had heard it. But there is a story that I want to share that along those lines about missing Palm Sunday. There was a 5-year-old boy who had to stay home from church because he had come down ill with the flu. And so his parents got a babysitter so that they and the rest of the kids could go to church and attend Palm Sunday. And so when they returned from church, the little 5-year-old saw that they all were carrying these palm branches. And so the little boy asked what they were for, and the mother explained, well, people laid them on the ground and held them over Jesus' head as he walked by. And the boy's eyes got really big, and then there was a look of disappointment that came over him, and he said, wouldn't you know it, the one Sunday I don't go and Jesus shows up? So you might not have been here last Sunday. It was good, but Jesus didn't show up physically. And this Sunday really is about when Jesus rose up from the dead, or demonstrated that which we call death is not what it appears to be, and that the Spirit of God that lives in Jesus also lives in you and me, that we are eternal beings living an eternal life, and that essentially all of Jesus' ministry was about removing all fear. Every possible fear that a person could have, so that you could be free and really experience the peace of God that passeth all understanding, which really is a dimension of the kingdom of God. When you live with peace and fear has left, love surges in, and you become that which you were created to be and express as. And that was what Jesus' ministry was about. Now, there are many stories and many messages and viewpoints on various aspects of the Bible, of course, and we've been in different places and heard different messages and different interpretations and a variety of things, and different theology and what have you. And we also sometimes misinterpret what is being communicated. And there's a story about a pastor and a priest who were in a small town, serving in a small town, and their parishes, and they actually had their ministries kind of out in a country road and nearby, and they were out there holding up a sign on their country road, and it read, "The end is near. Turn yourself around now before it's too late." And the plan was to hold this up for each car that went by. These two clergymen were holding up. And so the first car came by. The driver leaned out the window and yelled, "Leave us alone, you religious nuts," and then sped up and went around the turn. And suddenly there was a screeching tires and a big splash. And the one clergyman said to the other, "Do you think we should have just put up a sign that simply said, 'Bridge out'?" So we are all here at this hour celebrating Easter. And what's the sign that we should be holding up? Well, it's maybe Christ is risen. He lives. Resurrection is now. It's a time for hallelujah. Praise God. Maybe you have a sign that you would hold up. But today, the bridge isn't out. A new bridge has been built through the message of Easter and resurrection, really. And the bridge is there to take us to new and higher dimensions of understanding who we are, the life we're living, the truth that sets us free. It's to put us in touch with this victorious spirit of the Christ within us all, that we can allow to express through us in an overcoming and victorious way. The different limitations and challenges and situations that we face, there is something within us that is greater than anything we can come to face. We teach here that God is good, and that the Spirit of God and good will always win out in the end. It's very important to know and to realize, no matter what you're facing, the Spirit of God and the Spirit of good will always win out in the end, regardless how things may appear, no matter what we are experiencing, how many crosses we've had to bear, good rises up. Good is always resurrected. All things eventually work together for good. There's a poem that I've come across that I love, especially the second stanza. There's two, and I'm going to read you only the second. It's called A Vision. It's by Anna Dershell, and it goes like this. No matter what life's future hours may hold of an earth-born sadness, I know there comes to me in truth a heritage of gladness that far transcends all grosser things. I've caught the vision glorious. We are a part of all that's good, and God and good shall be victorious. Let me read that last three lines. I've caught the vision glorious. We are a part of all that's good, and good shall be victorious. Hallelujah. Praise God. That is such a powerful truth. I love that. Good shall always be victorious. And we have to take that with us as a mantra. You know, sometimes the good that we're seeking is delayed. It doesn't come right away. Sometimes it takes a while. But in the end, when we know the truth and hold to the truth, good emerges and hearts open, and love and gratitude are once again restored and resurrected within us. There's a 4.5-hour flight from Seattle to Atlanta. And an hour into the flight, the captain's voice came out over the loudspeaker and intercom and said, "Is there any physician or nurse on board?" Nobody responded. So he came on again and asked a few minutes later, said there was a medical emergency on board, and is there any nurse or physician? No response. And so then he came on and said, we will be making an emergency stop. He apologized and said that there would probably be only delayed about 30 minutes. They were stopping in Denver on his way. And so an elderly gentleman, about 85 years old, had suddenly taken ill, and it wasn't clear as to whether or not he had a stroke or a heart attack or what it was, but he was ill, and they needed to stop. And so when they were there, actually, instead of 30 minutes, as the pilot had said, they were there an hour and a half. And when they finally pushed back from the gate, the pilot apologized profusely for the unavoidable delay. And he said that the stop had, of course, taken longer than that they had thought it would, and that connections that they had in Atlanta, those of them who had connections were going to miss them, miss their flights, but they would book them on the next available flight. And when he said that, there was a lot of moans and groans that went through people, of course, and about having to deal with the inconvenience that was the result of the unexpected stop. But then the pilot did a really classy thing. He said over the speaker, "Ladies and gentlemen, I thought you might be interested in one bit of information. That elderly gentleman who was taken off the plane was a Marine in World War II. And I'm holding in my hand a copy of the Congressional Medal of Honor that was awarded to him and signed by President Harry Truman in 1945. And then he went on to say, I realize that we have all been inconvenienced. However, in light of the fact that this gentleman was a war hero and was inconvenienced for 4 years of his life, in order that we might experience the freedoms that we all enjoy today, I thought you should know that." And immediately in the airplane, all the people began to applaud, and there was even cheering that went on. They were very pleased to know that this man had been cared for in a way that was appropriate, with the respect and dignity that he deserved, having served in such a fashion. It's a nice ending, isn't it, to the story? You know, an end when the truth is really known, our heart opens, and that joy and celebration and love is, again, resurrected. It's a hallelujah kind of experience. Praise God that that happens in people. Now, the man who wrote this article, he went on to say and speak about the incident. He said, "We were all concerned that we were inconvenienced for a couple of hours. And yet this man's entire life was interrupted and inconvenienced for 4 years while he fought to protect the freedoms and the values that we love and that we all hold dear." And so it made me think about, well, you know, it's interesting. Let's consider Jesus and his life and all he did, all he went through, our elder brother, to help us, to give us the spiritual values, the spiritual teachings, to set us free, to remove fear, take us back into love, help us remember who we are. the devotion, the dedication, the love, the commitment that was there, all he went through. As the poem states, I've caught the vision glorious. We are a part of all that's good, and good shall be victorious. Jesus was taking us into our greater good. Now, there are lots of examples of people who have started out, perhaps in their life, or gone through difficult times, dark nights of the soul, or just had to roll away the stone from their tomb, if you will, to go to the light. We've all had perhaps moments in time, but there are quite a number of known individuals that you are aware of. Just let me share some names. There was a so-called expert who said of Vince Lombardi, the great NFL coach, when he was starting out, this is, well, he possesses minimal football knowledge, and he lacks motivation. Interesting what he went on to do. Socrates was called an immoral corrupter of youth. Crazy. Some of you that remember Fred Astaire and The Great Dancer, for his first screen test, there was a memo that was written down about that. Can't act, can dance a little. Beethoven, one of his teachers called him hopeless as a composer. Walt Disney was fired by a newspaper editor for lack of ideas. He also went bankrupt several times before he built Disneyland. Thomas Edison's teachers said he was too stupid to learn anything. Albert Einstein didn't begin to speak words until he was 4. Didn't begin to read until he was 7. The teacher labeled him mentally slow. And Henry Ford, he was broke 5 times before he began to succeed. So the principle of resurrection was not exclusive to Jesus. And the message of Easter is that we can always have a comeback. We can always rise again. There are energies. We are co-creators with God. There are possibilities and divine ideas and ways in which the Spirit can move through us and rise up again and take us into new dimensions of life and living. We should be really circling higher and higher, spiraling higher and higher in consciousness and awareness in the life that we are experiencing and living. We all go through dark times, and it's up to us whether or not the dark is going to win or we're going to consciously move back toward the light and the truth that sets us free. Martin Luther was quoted to say, "Our Lord has written the promise of resurrection not in books alone, but in every leaf of springtime." W.P. Lemon, a man, wrote, "Easter is not a passport to another world. It's a quality of perception for this one." I love that. Do you have that quality of perception for this world, here and now, where resurrection can live in you? Wow, I want that. We've all had resurrections in our days and in our lives. Things where we perhaps made the comeback from sadness to joy, and from fear to love, and from illness to health, and from lack to prosperity, from separation to oneness, various kinds of comebacks. We've had them. Hallelujah, we've had them. Have you? Have you? Do you remember them? Can you recall them? I do, and I live from them. In the Gospel of John, chapter 17, Jesus says, and actually he's praying a prayer for you and me. And his prayer is, "Holy Father, keep them in thy name, which thou hast given me, that they may be one, even as we are one." What does that mean? Keep them in my name. Means keep them in the nature of, in the character of, in the likeness of, in the image of, in the consciousness of, that which we have had, that relationship, that awareness, that awakenedness. Keep them in that nature, in that consciousness. See, the name Christ, which Jesus took on, means anointed, or anointed of God. Now, we all have the anointed of God in us. Now, we may not be living it. We may not be there yet. That's part of what we're growing and unfolding toward. But that's what we're to begin to identify more with. We all have the anointed of God in us. And that's a hallelujah, a praise God to know that. In verse 21 of that same 17th chapter, Jesus says, the glory which you have given me, I have given to them, that they may be one as we are one. That's a pretty powerful statement. The glory of God is in all of us then. And the glory of God, I like to call the glow of God. It's the glow of a loving heart. It's the glow of an aliveness. It's the glow of a joy, a peacefulness, a presence, a way that a person is presencing themselves. Sometimes we lose that. There's a parable that Jesus taught, and it was called the parable of the lost coin. And in it, Jesus shares and begins and states basically this. What woman, having 10 pieces of silver, if she loses one piece, doesn't light a candle, sweep the whole house, and seek diligently until she finds it? And when she has found it, she calls all her friends and all her neighbors together, saying, rejoice with me, I have found the piece which was lost. Well, that speaks to me because I think maybe sometimes we have a missing piece and we have to find it again. Sometimes, life hits us or strikes us in various ways and we lose a part of ourselves and we have to find that again. We have to resurrect that sense of connection once again and have the glow, the glorious glow that Jesus prayed that we all have. Sometimes, we may be physically living in a body, but we may be dead to life. In moments and times that happens, and we have to resurrect that life back. Maybe the missing piece is forgiveness. This past week, I sent out a Facebook post about Easter, and it was that resurrection is more than a physical happening, that resurrection is a spiritual internal happening that has happened to me many times and to others as well. And that was kind of the point of it, but my executive director, Carolyn, she found an image to send with the post. And the image that went with it was of one who was looking out from a tomb or a cave, and so there was darkness, and then there was an opening of light. And in the distance, there was a hill, and it was Golgotha. And there were 3 crosses there, and they were all empty. There was no one suffering. They had been taken down. And this woman came to me during the week and shared how that had spoken to her and made such a difference for her. That image, there were 3 people in her life, she said, that she needed to forgive, that she needed to take down off the cross, that she had had on that cross for years, and it had been taking and draining her. It was a missing piece for her, was that forgiveness that had to happen. She said 2 of the people were such and such in her life, and the other was herself, that she had herself on the cross, that she had to forgive herself for some things out of the past. How powerful that was for her to be free and take them down as well of herself, the guilt, the shame, the whatever. Hallelujah that people are finding their way like that. Praise God. Do you recall the Easter story as it's shared? And it's in the Gospels, of course, and the one that I like to refer to is the Gospel of John in this instance that has so many mystical implications in its writings. And anyway, Mary Magdalene had gone early in the morning to visit the tomb, and her purpose was to perform some particular rites with oils and so forth that hadn't been done for the body. And she was distressed when she got there that the body of Jesus was gone. And she had no thought that Jesus had risen. Her immediate thought was the body had been stolen or someone had moved it. And so she went and got Peter and John and brought them back and said, look, and they surveyed the situation. Yep, he's gone. And they had no idea of resurrection either. And so Mary, after they left, Mary remained outside the tomb and she was weeping. And then 2 angels showed up. And they said, woman, why are you weeping? And she began to tell them why. And then something else got her attention and looked and turned and she saw Jesus. But she didn't know that it was Jesus. She thought it was a gardener. And so Jesus asked her a question and said, woman, why are you weeping? Same question as the angels. And she answered, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him. Still thinking it was the gardener. And then Jesus said, instead of addressing her as woman, this time he said, Mary, Mary. And she immediately recognized that it was Jesus in that tender voice and way in which he addressed her name. And she exclaimed, "Rabboni, Rabboni," teacher. She knew immediately it was him. On some level, Christ is calling your name. Might be somebody calling a child's name. That child is alive and well. This poignant moment, we're all being called. That's my point. You may or may not have heard your name called, but the Christ in you is calling you away from the weeping and the illusion of life to realize that there is a resurrecting spirit. There is something to move you forward and onward and upward. It's always there. It happens in many ways. And so we're all being called to the next open door, if you would, to a greater good. You know, some of you remember Houdini? Remember? Some of you may not. It's okay, I'll tell you about him. The great Houdini, who was known as the great escape artist. And he had the ability to get out of really difficult situations, and that was kind of his skill. And he would be put into death-defying situations and bound and shackled and locked in chains and all of these things, and then put in a difficult place, and he would escape them. And during one of his famous escapes, Houdini arranged that he be dropped in a hole in the ice of a river, a frozen river. And he was shackled and you know, chained up and all this, and then thrown into a trunk, and the trunk was padlocked and whatnot, and they threw the trunk in the hole of this river that was covered with ice. And so he freed himself and shot up toward the surface, but unfortunately, he did not anticipate the current of the river had moved the trunk down the river, and he could not find the hole. And he only had seconds to live, or he'd be out of breath. And so he panicked at first, and he went in different directions, swimming rapidly, and then realized that he could just as well be going in the wrong direction as the right. So he paused, calmed himself, and he went to kind of up against the ice at the top where, with the current of a river, there's every once in a while a pocket of a bubble where you get up against the ice, and he would just get a part of a breath to hold himself over. And he knew also that because the river was so cold, he may die. He was losing, you know, everything was shutting down. And so he began to think, this may be it. This may be my time. This is the one escape I'm not going to succeed in. And suddenly, Houdini heard his mother calling his name. And with the last bit of strength that he had, he swam in the direction of the sound of his mother calling his name. And it led him to the hole. And he came up out of the hole, gasping. They dragged him out, half dead, to the loud, robust applause of the crowd, not knowing that this event had gone amok. He learned later that his mother certainly was not at the event. And not only that, that she had been at home and had died at home in bed at precisely the moment that he had been trapped beneath the ice and heard her voice calling to him. And that experience instilled in Houdini a lifelong interest in spiritual realities and a conviction that there truly was another spiritual dimension to awaken to. We're all being called. We're all being called back to an opening that leads to life. The Spirit of God is calling your name. You know, it could be Joe, John, Mary, Houdini, whatever. I wish I could call all of your names right now. But perhaps inside you're hearing it. And you're all called to something higher. That's what this life is about, to resurrect that something. So today is Easter, and it should be your resurrection day as well. It's a time for hallelujah. And notice I've been saying hallelujah a lot during this talk. And that's a good thing, because hallelujah, it's a hallelujah day, it's a hallelujah life, it's a hallelujah happening, it's a hallelujah resurrection. That's what it's about. We should be hallelujah. Now the word hallelujah is the combining of two biblical Hebrew words. Hallelu which means praise. And it means praise it means praise in plural. So hallelujah means all of you praise. All of you praise. And Yah, hallelujah, is the biblical name for God. Yahweh, Yah. And in Latin, hallelujah is pronounced alleluia with no H sound. That's Latin, but we're talking about the Hebrew. And alleluia occurs actually in the book of Psalms 25 times. And it was a word that was used as a lead-in to a psalm, which is a song of God, praising God. So it was a lead-in. It began with a hallelujah, and then at the end it would end with a hallelujah. So a person would shout, hallelujah, to get the attention of the whole crowd or the people that were gathered around. And they would get their attention, and then that person would begin to sing the praises of the words of truth, and would sing the psalm. And at the end of the psalm, then everyone said together, hallelujah, hallelujah. Just like Jesus in that parable said, when you find that missing piece, you all celebrate and come together. All right? Now, in Psalm 150, I love that one, and actually the last 5 Psalms, it does this. It begins with a praise and it ends with a praise. And so it starts hallelujah, praise God in his sanctuary, praise him in the firmament of his power. Let everything, and this is an important verse, let everything that has breath praise the Lord. You have breath. You've been given the breath of life. Let everything that has breath praise the Lord. Hallelujah. Now, Leonard Cohen is a very famous and amazing composer who created this tremendous song called Hallelujah. And the lyrics of the song are not really religious, intentionally, purposely. He knew that there was this traditional hallelujah that was an ancient word calling out, let's all praise God. And Cohen wanted to continue in that tradition, really, but be dependent of any specific religion, have it be more universal, that simply took people together in this universal energy and feeling of connectedness and oneness and love and who they were and hallelujah and that. Nothing would separate them, not the barriers of one religion and its theology and another, everyone. So that was what he was about, and that's what he tried to do in creating his song, Hallelujah, creating that feeling. So today, we want to praise God, okay? And we want to praise Jesus in the resurrection and the intent that he had to get us into hallelujah. When you praise God, you feel something. If it's coming from the heart. And so we want to get to hallelujah, to connect with the divine as Jesus did, to be used by the divine as Jesus did, to experience the energies and the power of God as Jesus did, to feel love and life and light, to open the floodgates, to not be timid, to not be afraid, to be willing to be vulnerable, to feel, and to say yes at the deepest level of our being. There was a Mary Martin who was, years ago, a great Broadway musical actor. And before going on one day, she received a note from Oscar Hammerstein. And he was a great musical director, did 850 musicals. And anyway, he sent a note. Him being very famous, it touched her before she went on. And essentially the message in the note said, Mary, a bell's not a bell till you ring it. A song's not a song till you sing it. And love isn't love till you give it. She went out and she performed so amazingly. People asked her afterwards, what happened to you? You were amazing. She told them the story. A bell's not a bell till you ring it. A song's not a song till you sing it. Love's not love till you give it. So we're here to say hallelujah in that way. The lesson is a blending into a song that the choir is going to sing. And you will be asked to rise and join hands and sing the last chorus of Hallelujah. You'll be cued to do that. But be on the alert and watch and then feel and go into it, okay? So I hope you'll open your heart. I hope you'll feel the song. I hope you will breathe into Hallelujah. For now, as I close, let us together praise the God of all that is. Would you join me in saying Hallelujah 3 times? Together? Hallelujah. Stronger. Hallelujah. Again. Hallelujah. God. Hallelujah. Amen.